The world watches, but too often it turns away. In 2025, Africa stands at a crossroads where hope collides with horror. While some nations rise with promise, hidden beneath the headlines are voices silenced, lives shattered, and truths so disturbing they demand to be told right now. Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the realities that shape our world. Today, we uncover the shocking truth about human rights abuses in Africa in 2025, a story that is not just about one country or one people, but about an entire continent struggling against silence, corruption, and oppression. What you are about to hear is raw, urgent, and unforgettable. Africa, the world's second-largest continent, is home to over 1.4 billion people. It is rich in culture, resources, and history. Yet for decades, it has also been a land where human rights are often trampled upon with impunity. In 2025, the situation has reached alarming levels, exposing the fragility of justice and the resilience of ordinary people forced to endure unimaginable suffering. Across the continent, governments are signing treaties, attending summits, and promising reforms. But behind the polished speeches and staged photographs, abuses continue to stain the ground where citizens walk. From state violence to silenced journalists, from unlawful detentions to gender-based violence, the dark shadow of oppression has not lifted. Let us begin in East Africa, where Ethiopia's conflict has left scars that no peace agreement can fully erase. The Tigray region, once the center of war, is still recovering, but new reports suggest that even in so-called peace, mass arrests, torture, and disappearances persist. Families are torn apart, villages live under military surveillance, and those who dare to speak risk vanishing overnight. For many Ethiopians, the war may have ended on paper, but the reality of repression is still alive. Mothers search desperately for their missing sons. Survivors speak in whispers about atrocities that still linger in their nightmares. Journalists who try to investigate face threats, harassment, or exile. The silence imposed is as violent as the war itself. In Sudan, the situation is even more devastating. The power struggle between rival military factions has turned into one of the worst humanitarian crises of our time. Cities lie in ruins, millions are displaced, and hunger stalks every corner. Hospitals have been bombed, women have been assaulted, and children are being recruited into militias. The world talks of negotiations, but in 2025, ordinary Sudanese people are left with only one reality: survival. Families huddle in overcrowded refugee camps, uncertain of when their next meal will come. Humanitarian aid is often blocked or stolen. Voices calling for peace are drowned out by the roar of weapons. What is happening in Sudan is not just a political struggle, it is a war on human dignity itself. Traveling further south, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, violence continues to rage in the mineral-rich east. Rebel groups, government forces, and foreign interests all compete for control of resources like cobalt and coltan, minerals that power the very devices we are using right now. Behind every smartphone, behind every electric car battery, there may be a child miner who has never seen a classroom, forced into the dark tunnels of illegal mines, risking his life for pennies a day. Reports in 2025 reveal that forced labor and exploitation have not just continued but grown worse as global demand skyrockets. Communities are terrorized by armed groups. Women and girls face horrific sexual violence. Villages are burned, and displacement has become a way of life. International corporations claim ignorance, but the truth is that their profits are stained with the suffering of Congo's people. Meanwhile, in West Africa, authoritarian governments have tightened their grip on power. Journalists in countries like Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso are being harassed, threatened, and jailed for reporting the truth. Military juntas promise security but often deliver repression. Protests are met with bullets, curfews, and fear. And yet, the people keep resisting, demanding freedom even when it comes at the cost of their lives. In Burkina Faso, voices of dissent are silenced under accusations of spreading disinformation. In Mali, entire communities live under the threat of extremist violence while the state fails to protect them. Human rights abuses come from both insurgents and governments, leaving citizens trapped between two ruthless forces. Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation, is facing multiple crises at once. Kidnappings for ransom have become widespread, targeting students, farmers, and ordinary workers. The government's response has been weak, and in many regions, citizens feel abandoned. Human rights groups report a disturbing rise in police brutality, echoing the global calls that once fueled the End SARS movement. In 2025, Nigerians still struggle with the same injustice they protested years ago, only now it has evolved into something even more dangerous. Corruption within security agencies ensures that justice rarely comes. Rural communities face violent attacks by armed gangs. Displaced families live in constant fear. The promise of democracy feels distant to those who live under daily terror. In North Africa, authoritarianism remains deeply rooted. In Egypt, political dissent is still crushed with an iron fist. Tens of thousands of political prisoners remain behind bars, many held without trial. Families wait endlessly for their loved ones to come home, but hope fades with every year. Surveillance technology has turned into a weapon used not to protect but to control. Freedom of expression has become a dream. Even artists and writers risk prison if their work challenges the state's narrative. And in countries like Libya, chaos continues to thrive in the absence of stable governance. Migrants crossing through Libya are trapped in horrific detention centers, facing torture, abuse, and slavery-like conditions. Even in 2025, modern slavery is not just a memory, it is a living nightmare for countless men, women, and children. Many of them are beaten, sold, or exploited, their cries unheard by the outside world. For migrants fleeing conflict or poverty in other African countries, Libya is often not the gateway to safety, but the beginning of a new hell. Across the continent, women and girls are among the most vulnerable. Gender-based violence has skyrocketed in conflict zones. In some areas, rape is still being used as a weapon of war, a cruel strategy to terrorize entire communities. Even outside of war, harmful practices like child marriage and female genital mutilation persist, stripping girls of their childhood and their futures. Women who speak out against these abuses are often silenced or targeted. And yet, they continue to fight, leading grassroots movements that challenge deeply entrenched traditions. Their bravery is rewriting the story of resistance. The tragedy does not end there. In many countries, LGBTQ+ communities live in constant fear. In Uganda, harsh anti-LGBTQ+ laws introduced in recent years have sparked a wave of arrests, harassment, and violence. In 2025, these laws have not only destroyed lives, but have also emboldened hatred across the region. People are beaten, families are torn apart, and identities are erased, all in the name of politics and power. But even in this climate of fear, LGBTQ+ activists are finding ways to resist, building underground networks of solidarity and refusing to be silenced. What makes these abuses even more shocking is the silence. Too often, global powers express concern, but fail to take meaningful action. International organizations issue reports, but accountability rarely follows. Abusers remain in power while victims are left voiceless. Human rights defenders are left to fight alone, facing risks that few outsiders truly comprehend. And yet, within this darkness, there is light. Brave activists, journalists, and ordinary citizens are risking everything to fight back. Across Africa, youth movements are rising, demanding justice, demanding accountability, demanding a future free from oppression. In 2025, they are louder, bolder, and more determined than ever. Their courage proves that even in the face of overwhelming power, the human spirit cannot be crushed. They march despite the threat of bullets. They speak despite the fear of imprisonment. They dream despite the weight of despair. They know the cost of freedom may be high, but they also know the cost of silence is far greater. The question is not whether human rights abuses in Africa exist. The evidence is undeniable. The question is whether the world will finally listen, whether leaders will finally act, and whether we, as ordinary people across the globe, will finally recognize that their fight is also our fight. Because human rights are not regional, they are not cultural, they are universal, and every abuse left unchallenged anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This is the shocking truth about Africa in 2025, a truth that demands to be told, demands to be heard, and demands to be acted upon. The time to turn away has passed. The time to confront injustice is now. Consider the story of Mariam, a mother from Sudan. She once lived a normal life in Khartoum, raising 3 children and running a small food stall. When the fighting erupted between rival generals, her neighborhood became a battlefield. She fled with her children, walking for days without food, carrying nothing but a blanket and a bottle of water. Today, in 2025, she lives in a camp with thousands of others, surviving on rations that rarely come on time. She speaks of the day she lost her husband, shot by armed men as he tried to protect their home. Her story is not unique. It is the story of millions of Sudanese families who lost everything in a war they never chose. Now think of Jean, a young boy in the Democratic Republic of Congo. At just 13 years old, he works in a cobalt mine. His hands are scarred from breaking rocks, his lungs weak from breathing toxic dust. He never went to school. His father was killed by militia, and his mother could not afford to keep the family alive without his work. Jean's life fuels the technology we all use, from smartphones to electric cars. Behind every shining promise of green energy, children like Jean are paying the price. This is the hidden cost of progress, and it is a debt that can never be repaid. In Uganda, meet Grace, a university student who dared to speak out against the country's harsh anti-LGBTQ+ laws. She was arrested during a peaceful protest, beaten by police, and threatened with life in prison. She now lives in hiding, unable to return home, her only crime being the courage to stand for love and freedom. Grace's voice echoes the cries of thousands silenced by laws designed not to protect but to punish. These stories reveal the human face of abuse. Statistics can shock, but it is these lived experiences that force us to see the cost of silence. But beyond war, conflict, and authoritarian regimes, Africa's human rights crisis is also being fueled by the climate emergency. In the Horn of Africa, drought has ravaged lands for years. Somalia, Kenya, and Ethiopia are witnessing the worst food insecurity in decades. Crops have failed, livestock have died, and millions are on the brink of starvation. Hunger itself has become a weapon. Governments and armed groups manipulate aid for political gain. Families forced to move in search of water face violence and exploitation along the way. The climate crisis is not only about rising temperatures. It is about rising suffering, rising displacement, and rising inequality. In southern Africa, countries like Mozambique and Malawi continue to battle devastating cyclones, each one leaving behind destroyed homes, lost lives, and shattered futures. Natural disasters strike, but the lack of accountability and preparation turns them into human rights catastrophes. Aid money is stolen, corruption thrives, and victims are left in makeshift shelters waiting for help that never arrives. International powers often promise assistance, but the reality tells a different story. The United Nations releases reports, condemns atrocities, and calls for action. Yet, in conflict after conflict, accountability is missing. The African Union, created to defend the rights of its people, too often finds itself paralyzed by politics and the interests of powerful leaders. Western nations speak of democracy but continue to sign deals with authoritarian regimes, valuing resources and influence over human rights. China and Russia expand their influence, offering weapons and loans without asking questions about abuses. The global system, built on promises of justice, is riddled with hypocrisy. And so, African citizens find themselves abandoned, their suffering ignored, until it spills into the headlines. Refugees attempting to cross the Mediterranean often drown before reaching Europe, their names erased from memory. Those who survive are detained in overcrowded camps, treated not as human beings but as numbers in a political debate. The international community mourns briefly, then returns to silence, leaving the cycle to repeat. Yet in the midst of betrayal, Africa's people continue to resist. In Nigeria, youth movements are rising once more, demanding that the government end corruption and protect its citizens. In Sudan, women are at the forefront of protests, risking arrest and assault for the hope of a free future. In the Congo, human rights defenders document abuses despite the risk of assassination. In Uganda, underground networks fight to protect LGBTQ+ people, offering safe houses and escape routes. These movements may not always make headlines, but they are the heartbeat of Africa's fight for freedom. One cannot ignore the bravery of journalists across the continent. In Cameroon, reporters documenting the Anglophone crisis are targeted by both government forces and separatist rebels. In Somalia, those who expose corruption are silenced with bullets. In Zimbabwe, independent media face relentless crackdowns. Yet they continue to write, to film, to share the truth, often at the cost of their lives. The courage of these individuals stands in sharp contrast to the indifference of powerful governments. Children remain the most vulnerable. In conflict zones, they are recruited as soldiers, forced to carry weapons before they even understand what war means. Girls are married off at a young age, their futures stolen before they begin. Entire generations are growing up in refugee camps, knowing only hunger and fear instead of books and classrooms. The abuses they face today will shape Africa for decades to come. Still, Africa's future is not only a story of despair, it is also a story of resilience. Communities devastated by war come together to rebuild schools. Women who survived sexual violence form support networks to help others heal. Youth activists organize online campaigns that reach millions, proving that even under surveillance and censorship, the truth can find a way out. The struggle is far from over, but it is alive, and that is what gives hope. The shocking truth about human rights abuses in Africa in 2025 is not simply that they exist, it is that they persist in plain sight. The evidence is overwhelming, the testimonies undeniable. The world can no longer claim ignorance. The real question is whether the world has the courage to confront its own complicity. Every cobalt battery, every political deal, every silence in the face of oppression ties us to the suffering of Africa's people. We cannot claim neutrality. To look away is to choose the side of the oppressor. To remain silent is to allow the abuse to continue. But to listen, to speak, to act, that is where change begins. And change is possible. History shows that even the most brutal systems eventually fall when people refuse to accept them. The fight for human rights in Africa is not only Africa's fight, it is humanity's fight. It is a call to conscience, a test of whether our world values profit over people, silence over justice, or whether we will finally rise to the responsibility we all share. This is not just news. It is not just a story. It is a reality unfolding as we speak, a reality demanding action. The shocking truth has been revealed. What happens next will depend on whether we choose to confront it or to turn away. Because at the heart of every statistic, every report, every headline is a human life. A mother searching for her missing child, a boy trapped in a mine, a student in hiding, a protester facing down a gun. They are not numbers, they are people, and their cries cannot be ignored. This is Africa in 2025, a continent of beauty and pain, resilience and repression, hope and horror. The story is not over, it is being written right now, and you have just heard the truth that too many wish to keep hidden. The only question left is, what will we do about it? Thank you for watching and for standing with the voices that too often go unheard. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it, speak about it, and keep the conversation alive. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that matter, and together, let's shine a light where others choose darkness. Until next time, stay aware, stay strong, and never stop fighting for justice.